28 days ago, the British Broadcasting Corporation or the BBC hit the headlines for a documentary they released called India, the Modi Question. The documentary was quickly taken off social media websites and a few colleges held screenings in defiance. There was action against them too. Both the showing of the documentary as well as the ban on it has reached the Supreme Court. In the midst of all of this, news broke today that the Income Tax Department is conducting surveys on the Mumbai and Delhi offices of the BBC. They've seized phones and laptops of journalists working there, and government sources said there were charges of evasion of taxes by the BBC because they've not complied with India's transfer pricing laws. The IT department sources have also gone to great lengths to clarify that this was a survey and not a raid. The Editors Guild and the Press Club of India has called the action harassment of voices that are critical of the government. The opposition has condemned it, and the BJP says the BBC is corrupt and no one is above the law. Today on the show, we're going to look into what exactly happened. What is transfer pricing? What's the difference between a survey and the raid? And look at the timing of the action. Is this a signal being sent by the government to a global media organization, and will it actually make a difference? Is this an attempt to muzzle the free press, or are there valid reasons for the taxman to land up at the newsrooms of an organization that is over 100 years old? Like in most such cases, the views are highly polarized. Listen in.
इनकम टैक्स विभाग समय समय पर जहां पर अनियमितताएं पाई जाती हैं वहां पर सर्वेस करता है, और जब वे सर्वे का काम पूरा होता है तब वो अपना एक प्रेस नोट या प्रेस ब्रीफिंग करके जानकारी देते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है जब ये इनकम टैक्स विभाग का सर्वे पूरा होगा वो जानकारी पूरी आपको डिटेल में दे देंगे, और कोई भी देश में न्याय से ऊपर तो या हमारी जो कानून व्यवस्था है उससे ऊपर तो कोई नहीं हो सकता।
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में, और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है। विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धि।
यहाँ पे कोई भी एजेंसी हो, आईटी हो, इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट, चाहे जांच एजेंसियां हो, ये वो पिंजरे का तोता नहीं रही हैं जो सर्वोच्च न्यायालय ने कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार को फटकार लगाई थी। बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें, जिसके उदाहरण मैं आपके समक्ष अभी पेश करूंगा, तो ये पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है। और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है।
Domestically, we have been seeing repeatedly how media freedom has been crushed. Our rankings show that, and how journalists who are really pursuing the cause of holding the government to account are suppressed. They are called anti-national. They are given various terms. They are demonized. They are also mocked at through using various agencies. IT raids have become the norm. ED opening up files has become the norm. So the domestic media is more or less, except for the independent media, which is through online platforms, we see some activity happen there. Otherwise, more or less, they have pushed them into submission. Now we're seeing the same project being carried forward through international news channels, international news agencies, which I think will obviously attract attention of the global, people globally, trying to understand just how democratic are we in trying to understand, in trying to ensure that we have freedom of speech and expression in this country. So it will bring more focus back to India and how India looks at itself as a democratic nation which talks about freedom of speech.
And the Congress is
G20 does raise questions about the idea behind this.
All right, so the raids are still going on, not the raids, the surveys, the action is still going on. I'm going across first to Tejashree, my colleague who's joining me live from the Delhi BBC office to get the latest details. Tejashree, what is the action on as we speak? How many officers are there?
See, as of now, we are standing right below the building of the BBC. In fact, the office premises of the BBC, which is at the 5th floor. And what we are learning as of now is that the survey, IT survey, is still underway on the 5th floor. Now, responding to your question that how is the security deployment over here, I would like to tell you one by one that what is the security deployment. Look, here it is the out gate where I am standing as of now. Nobody is allowed to go inside via this out gate. However, security is also deployed over here at the out gate. Now, there is one more gate behind this gate, and from there entry and exit points have been made. Certainly their police is also deployed, security is also deployed, and when you will be showing your ID card and if you work inside this building, then only you will be able to go inside the building. Now again, if you could show the visuals of inside this building, telling you and getting a sense from what we are getting a sense from the 5th floor of the building is that there is also a heavy security deployment on the 5th floor. Only the people who are working in the BBC in Delhi over here at the KG Marg office are allowed to go inside. Nobody else is apart from that. Nobody else is allowed to enter the 5th floor, because you see that this is the IT survey that's been going on, and it's more than 10 hours, and still what we are learning is that this survey will continue. These searches will continue the entire night, and tomorrow morning also these searches or survey will continue perhaps. But what we are learning is that, see, if we see the sequence of events that had been taking place since morning, and then first of all we learned that there were IT searches first of all going on, but then the statement came out, and then we learned that these are perhaps the IT surveys. Now there is a major difference between
right. So we get the drift. There's action going on all night long. There's action going on all night long. We need to figure out what exactly tax authorities can find from newsrooms. What will they find if they're looking at newsrooms, and what exactly are they looking for? Now, that was a report from Delhi. There is a action and survey was going on in Mumbai as well. Shweta filed this report a short while ago.
It's been more than 10 hours where the Income Tax Department is conducting their survey in the BBC office situated in Mumbai. It is important to note that there is alleged tax evasion on BBC part, and this is the reason why the IT department has been probing on two important angles. First is under-declared income by BBC, and secondly, if there is any kind of foreign funds involved in it. These are two factors that has to be established, but before that it has been seen that the multiple survey action which has been taken by the Income Tax Department in the offices of BBC situated in Mumbai and Delhi has been taking place. It is important to note that at least 24 of IT officials are carrying out this survey action which is being taken on BBC. With this, it has also been informed that the BBC employees would be working from home tomorrow onwards, as this has been anticipated by BBC Studios that it might take 2 to 3 days for IT department to complete their survey, which they have started from today onwards.
Karuna Gopal of the BJP with me on the show today. Author Ratan Sharda joining us. I'm speaking with Yashuvardhan Azad, former IPS officer. Sanjay Jha, author, with me on the show, as is Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist. Let me begin with the journalist on the panel because we're talking about a survey on the BBC and the Press Guild, the Press, Club of India, the Editors Guild has put out very harsh reactions to this. Madhavan, should this be looked at as an attack on the freedom of the press?
I would say yes, Tamanna, but I think there are three ways of looking at this, three vital angles. One, of course, is the most obvious one that you just mentioned, that if just 1 month after a controversial documentary on the Prime Minister, if the government's agency, which is, of course, not a flash in the pan because several such raids have established a certain pattern that everyone can discern, whether it's a CBI or Enforcement Directorate or income tax. There has been a weaponization of normal departments of the civil service and police. So there is too much data out there for us not to put a probability of politics on this. So that is the first observation. Therefore, the Editors Guild or the Press Club are justified in saying what they say, especially in the backdrop of a controversial documentary on the Prime Minister by the BBC itself. The second thing which I am very concerned about as a journalist is that if there is an income tax survey in a media office, please remember this building also houses the offices of Mint and Hindustan Times. And to that extent, it disrupts the work of journalists. And I'm particularly intrigued that journalists' laptops and phones have been searched, which basically means their confidential sources or documents could be under scrutiny by sleuths, which is a direct interference in the freedom of the press, because any tax survey should ordinarily concern only the finance department, because journalists only have travel expenses and salary bills that normally go through. So this is a matter of concern. The third and most important point I want to say is that there is a politics to it, in a sense of not just BBC. Let me give a deeper political interpretation, because basically as journalists, we are taught, Tamanna, not to take anything at face value. So if there's an allegation that China has funded the BBC documentary, which seems to be actually being spoken by Mahesh Jethmalani, who's a lawyer speaking more or less on behalf of the government, and every conspiracy theory deserves another. So some of us, I've heard say that the Adani scam or Adani files or Adani group share valuation controversy, whatever you want to call it, if that is shaking up the government at some level, that might hurt the government more than, let's say, the BBC documentary, because the BBC controversy is in line with the image of what the government has been going through.
Okay, that's fine, but Madhavan, I'd rather stick to facts. I'd rather stick to facts than conspiracy theories, because
I think
we journalists
I agree
love
with
conspiracy
you.
theories. I keep them out of the realm of this show. Let's look at the facts of what has happened today. The survey has taken place. Yes, we know. The survey has taken place. And let me widen up the discussion here. The survey has taken place. Our reporter has quoted government sources on the reasons of the Income Tax Department to conduct this survey. And that is important. There is a reasoning that has been given. It's also important to note that it's not an official document or a press conference or anything that the Income Tax Department has put out. They've put this out through sources, and we'll put those details. They seem to circle around something called transfer pricing. And I'm just going to take a second to explain very loosely what that is. When you have an international organization functioning in India, a subsidiary functioning in India, the price at which you transfer goods and services to your parent company are scrutinized by the Income Tax Department to see if you're doing that at lower prices so as to avoid paying taxes on the money you make in the country. Because where your parent organization is, perhaps the tax rates are lower. I'm putting this very loosely. So tax evasion is the charge. Karuna Gopal, if tax evasion is the charge, and as these sources have said that the BBC has been ignoring notices for a long time, why the raids now? Or why the survey now, in such close proximity to the documentary?
Look, Tamanna, I think you've answered most of the, at least better part of the question now. First of all, BBC as an entity. Is it? Yeah, BBC as an entity is a multinational corporation with operations spanning across geographies, across territories, and those territories come under their own tax laws and their own regulatory bodies. And in India, the transfer pricing and the related party transactions are being basically looked at by the Central Board of Direct Taxes. Now, we believe that there has been a bit of violation, because as you see, most of the multinationals, the transfer pricing it serves as a vehicle for tax evasion. I mean, we have seen... No,
1 minute, ma'am. When you say we believe there has been a bit of a violation, who is we? What is the violation and what are you basing this on? Because like I just told you, we have got this from our correspondents who've got this from government sources. What source are you quoting? I'm telling you what sources I'm quoting. So when your leader says that it's brushed corporation, BBC is brushed corporation, they're calling this 100-year-old corporation corrupt. When you're saying that you believe there is manipulation, are these sources you're quoting, or are you upset at a documentary that they put out which portrayed your leader in poor light?
No, Tamanna, I think, I doubt if they are actually related. BBC is not known to be a saint. BBC is not known to be a saint. It was pulled up by the UK government itself 2 years ago tax evasion, which perhaps ran into millions of dollars. So here we are talking about an entity that perhaps has to be investigated because, as I mentioned, it's a very large corporation. And whenever there are many subsidiaries, the transfer pricing is certainly a strong vehicle to avoid taxes. And we've seen it in multiple cases. As someone who's worked with many multinationals, I can tell you that most of the frauds or most of the tax evasion happens only through these routes. So when I say we, I'm talking about the income tax department. I'm talking about the Central Board of Direct Taxes. Perhaps there's evasion of GST as well. Maybe there is something. So today they are just
a bit of kite flying. Now you've gone from transfer pricing to related party transactions to GST evasion. This is a bit of kite flying. You're also saying that as a BJP leader, you're representing the income tax department. The CBDT chairman will be very upset right now, Ms. Gopal.
What? These are all linked. They come under.
He has not. I don't think he has authorized any political party to represent him. The actions being taken by the income tax department have to be seen at arm's length from any political party. You're refuting your own claims.
No. I'm saying this is not representation. I'm just giving you that, as I mentioned right at the beginning, that every territory has its own IT rules, IT taxation and regulatory bodies. And this falls under the purview. I said maybe there is a tax evasion, and that's why surveys are being done.
Sanjay Jha, maybe there is a tax evasion just because it's the BBC, the venerable BBC, just because it's a 100-year-old organization, doesn't mean that they're not possibly evading taxes and flouting Indian law. Why such a hue and cry if some taxmen show up?
Tamanna, I'm not going to speculate on how the investigating agencies under Mr. Modi's government works. We have had examples where the courts have rejected, have actually approved of bails and have said that there was no case that the ED had to even arrest people. So let's be honest, the institutions in this country are a joke and we are officially a banana republic. I'm not going to beat about the bush here. We are not a democracy. We can pretend that we are one. Mr. Modi's government is a ruthless, totalitarian, democratically elected dictatorship. Because let me tell you the truth. The truth is that the BBC documentary has raised some very uncomfortable truths, which Mr. Modi and his government are obviously very embarrassed to face. I mean, if the BBC is so discredited that the spokesperson of the party today ridiculed it as a bhrashtachar or whatever terms he used, why are you taking it so seriously? I mean, let us not pretend here that we were born yesterday. These raids today on the BBC, and I'm also a banker, by the way, so I could debate transfer pricing with the BJP leader on some other program of yours. We don't need any education on that aspect.
No, we should talk a bit. We should talk a bit about transfer pricing, but we'll do that in a bit. I do want to talk about it because there is a specific charge been made.
Yeah.
But my point, Sanjay, just a quick counter. If indeed this is the chronology of events that you are tracking, that this documentary came out and the government wants to teach BBC a lesson, then a few officers landing up at their office in their newsrooms in Mumbai and Delhi is not going to really make a difference to a company that is headquartered out of India. I mean,
Tamanna,
what are they going to do? They're not an Indian company.
Well, Tamanna, we have gone through this many a times in the past with many organizations. So I'm going to tell you this. This is going to play out exactly the way the BJP standard operating procedure is. This is, by the way, not just a messaging to the BBC. This is a messaging to several democratic platforms in India, online, maybe your channel, anyone. It's a message that if you try and take us on, listen, guys, we can do anything to anyone. And as far as the BBC is concerned, let me tell Madam Karuna Gopal of the BJP that the BBC actually is funded by the British taxpayer. Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani obviously is not aware of it. Secondly, the BBC takes on its own government. Boris Johnson, by the way, was in the process of defunding BJP because he was extremely worried about the kind of criticism he was getting from his own
Sanjay,
channel.
you said BJP instead of BBC.
Yeah. I think many people are making that mistake today. But the truth of life is this, Tamanna, that it's very easy to ridicule the BBC. I think many people have done that. I'm not here to defend some of their mistakes. All organizations make that mistake, including the New York Times. But the truth of the matter is that the BJP has a lot to hide. And the one thing that everyone is asking today of the BJP is, when you have open cases against the Adani Group, which have been talked about all over the world by Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, the Dow Jones, everyone is talking about it. The Adani Group stocks are not even accepted as collateral. There is no investigation on the Adani Group, on tax havens, on share price manipulation, on accounting frauds, on who is basically been funding their stocks from overseas, entities. I mean, this party is making India into a mammoth joke. And I think as a citizen of this country, I feel affronted that the BJP believes that a documentary on Modi is an insult to India. Mr. Modi is a prime minister. He's being questioned for his role
are
as the
the
chief
two
minister.
issues conflated and connected? Ratan Charda, are the two issues conflated and connected? And you know what is making the case, frankly, what is making the case weak for, yes, the BBC didn't comply? Journalists' phones are taken aside and cloned. Laptops and computers in a newsroom. Everyone knows that's not where, if someone has to do a tax gapla, is not going to be done in the newsroom. You have to catch the CFO or the finance department. What are you going to get except some numbers?
I'll tell you something very interesting. Tushar Gupta today is a journalist, has talked about BBC record in UK itself. Let's not make it a Snow White organization. In 2018, 800 presenters, you talked of journalists, 800 presenters were involved in tax evasion as per the structure of tax evasion created by BBC. £1 crore were saved per annum according to the reports. And finally, BBC paid 8.3 crore pounds sterling to government to close the case. If this is not corruption case, what is a corruption case? Coming to Congress, Mr. Sanjay is very eloquent about, Banana Republic and all. Today, Jairam Ramesh said, it reminds of emergency. So has finally Congress agreed that the emergency was a Banana Republic creation of the Congress? Have they agreed that they suppressed press all this time, and they didn't do any service to the democracy? And secondly, same Congress and same citizen, I nearly guffawed when they picked up a channel's editor, its owner, put him behind bar on wrong case. Not only that, no editor guild, no Congress ever spoke. Their minister clearly said that we are taking vendetta, and this guy is going to go mad. So that is also fine. Today he's talking about dictatorship. I do not understand the strange behavior of Mr. Sanjay Jha, who claims to be the biggest, Democrat in the world. And finally,
but Ratan Charda, one minute. Ratan Charda, I know you are excellent at debates and engaging, and then now Sanjay Jha will say what you have said is wrong. One minute.
Just one point.
Okay.
See, one second. Indira ji shut down BBC office for 6 months. No opposition called a dictator at that time. They may have 100 differences, but on BBC shutting down office, as far as I remember, no opposition opposed it or criticized.
But how is that relevant
today? There is something
today?
called national issue.
No, Mr. Sharda, now you've made your point. But, I appreciate your talent as a debater. You always rev up the show, and now I'm sure Sanjay Jha will have a great response for you. But frankly, with real curiosity, I'm asking ki connection kya hai? If BBC and the UK government ran into a skirmish, that may be. If Indira Gandhi wanted to ban the BBC, that may be. What is the connection with what I'm asking today? That if there was tax evasion, why the action 28 days after controversial documentary is out? Number one. Number two, if you want to figure out if the BBC is indulging in violation of India's transfer pricing laws, then having people in their newsroom seizing laptops and phones is not going to help. Logically, it's not going to help. So what are you after? Are you actually trying to glean information, or are you trying to scare? That's the question, Mr. Sharda. I want you to answer.
When I talked about 800 presenters under legal scanner, it meant that laptops of even presenters had some data about tax evasion, right? That's what I meant. Secondly, connection is to say that venerable 100-year-old BBC never makes a mistake. It's white as a Snow White. That's what I wanted to point out, because there are people who claim that BBC in entire life never made any mistake.
No,
never
no.
had any
How do we
fraud
know?
against it.
How do we
That's
know?
why I talked about that.
How do we know if they are making? How do we know if they're making mistakes or not? But the point is this just an ordinary
How do you
routine
know?
thing? Our income tax department survey is not seen as a broader messaging. Sanjay Jha, it's not white, Snow White. Snow White, said Ratan Sharda. The BBC is not Snow White.
Well, let me tell Mr. Sharda one point that he possibly tends to forget. What Mrs. Gandhi did during the emergency lasted for 21 months. But we have had 108 months of an undeclared emergency in India. Mr. Sharda, you can't dodge it. And Tamanna, the fundamental question here, we will wait to hear what the income tax department has to say. But the agencies in our country have become instruments of harassment for NGOs, for media, for opposition politicians, and it's documented. I can cite a million cases today. So the simple truth of the matter is this government cannot stomach any criticism,
Mr. Jha, Maharashtra
especially
government.
when it comes on the Prime Minister. And I'll tell you what has happened for the Prime Minister, unfortunately. Let's face the facts here. There's a double whammy for Mr. Modi, because Mr. Modi is now equal to the BJP. The BJP has been subsumed by him. And with the BBC documentary and the Adani issue exploding into major international scandals, I think Mr. Modi is right now fighting for cover. And that is the job of Mr. Sharda and other people to come and defend him. It's also possible that the way things are going, Mr. Modi might become a political liability for the BJP. You never know how politics plays out. But they cannot dodge facts by just trying to suppress them. I'm not saying that the BBC is necessarily.
No, how is it? You know what? I'll tell you
But
what's
you can't
not making
just
sense
criticize
in
them
this.
for coming out with the documentary.
Yashovardhan Azad, I'm coming to you now. I'll tell you what's not making sense in this.
He didn't respond
One minute. Mr. Azad has not even spoken, sir. Let me just get his point of view. And the reason why I wanted him on this show, I'll come back to you, Ratan Sharda. I promise you will get a complete opportunity to respond to Sanjay Jha. But this is more than just a tutu meme kind of a conversation. At least that's what we attempt to do. So which is why, Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, I want to understand that if, okay, I go by the version that this entire survey business is to scare the BBC. Anyway, the documentary they put out is available in the entire world. It's just been taken down on Indian social media channels, and that too has been challenged in court, if that was the purpose. They exist in a much larger fashion outside just India. India operations is one part of their entire global operations. On the other hand, if there was really non-compliance or evasion of taxes and violation of transfer pricing rules, is this the right way to do it? And why is the income tax department today at pains to say ye raid nahi tha, survey tha?
Thanks very much for remembering that I'm also on this show. I, of course, am not as exciting as the Tutu May debate which was going on earlier. For me, I'm neither a fan of the BBC nor a hater of the BBC. As far as the income tax surveys are concerned, of course, they have the authority under the 133A of the Act, and definitely they can do it. But the two questions which you have answered have ready-made answers. Of course, it's true that these raids or these surveys are related to what has happened earlier. But my point is, neither does the BBC documentary, which I haven't seen, I don't intend seeing, will dent or do anything to the BJP or Modi's popularity or whatever. And neither will these surveys by the income tax department will do anything to the BBC, because BBC is a huge, huge organization. And therefore, I feel that instead of sending the income tax people for this kind of an exploratory survey, which means that you're going to check the account books, you're going to see everything, but you don't have the right to take away their phones, you don't have the right to take away the laptops, because for that you need actually an authorization. And for that, actually, I feel, like America, you should take a judicial warrant. In this particular case, it is quite obvious that a message is being sent. It's unfortunate, because it would have been very graceful from the part of the government, and they should have done it, that after it's very clear that the SIT approved investigation under the monitoring by the SC has given its decision, the Supreme Court has given a decision. So I'm not going to accept any kind of, calumny or whatever kind of propaganda which the BBC is sending. I hope that BBC has also done a great program on the loot during the famine, when Mr. Churchill diverted the food stocks reserved for the soldiers, and also the loot which was taken away by the British during their
Mr.
entire
Azad, what
rule.
does it have to do with the surveys today?
This particular act, unfortunately, the survey, exactly, that's what I'm saying. The government is sending a message. What the government could have simply done was to send a notice to them and have the exact information which is required for them in terms of transfer pricing or the tax evasion, they could have easily got. Because if they are not conducting a raid, this is just an exploratory survey. So that is why it is related definitely to that documentary which has been released.
So just to understand, Mr. Azad, in a survey, can they take phones and laptops of employees? And as per the report, some of them have been cloned.
No.
Can all of that happen in a survey?
No.
So they have,
I don't think so. Survey is just, in fact, an income tax authority. Well, reportedly, I've heard on this, but the income tax official who came earlier, the retired income tax official, clearly stated. Well, that's unfortunate, because that can happen in raid when you have a judicial authorization or you are investing a criminal case or something. But otherwise, even in criminal case, taking away laptops, taking away, you have to have a proper authorization for that, and you have to give reasons for that, because it's a part of a seizure, and a seizure memo has to be drawn. I don't know whether all this practice has been done in this case.
Okay, so 4 computers have been seized, is what our information is at this point. What process has been followed for that will have to be seen. And in that case, can you keep calling it a survey? Is also another very important question. Yes, Mr. Madhavan, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think it's very important to remember, amid all these allegations and counter-allegations, that there are 3 fundamental rights of the Constitution that have been prima facie violated in these searches. One is, of course, the freedom of expression or free speech, because media usually is covered by that. Potentially, it's an infringement. A second infringement is the right to privacy, which has now been recognized by the Supreme Court. If laptops and mobile phones are cloned, even if they are not physically seized, cloning amounts to seizure of information that could be confidential in nature. And so the third right that has been possibly infringed is the right to practice any profession. And particularly the journalistic profession is of, although it is technically not guaranteed, unlike the US where there's a First Amendment, the media does have a special position in the right to
foreign organization,
and that should be examined by the court.
Do those constitutional safeguards, 1 minute, Madhavan, do those constitutional safeguards extend to a foreign organization?
Yeah. Yes, there are 2 reasons here. One is that if local laws apply in finance, they should also apply in freedom of speech. A second thing is most of the employees of the BBC in India are Indian nationals as citizens.
Correct.
They are covered by Indian law and they can practice. There is no law that says there are separate rules for foreign media and Indian media.
Okay.
If they are, then it's discrimination.
This is all, hush, because the tax man has not gone there and said, because your parent organization released a documentary, I am right now standing in your office. This is a conclusion that people have come to because of the sequence of events. Ratan Sharda, the point is, if this was an idea to send a message to the BBC, it seems to be counterproductive. If it was an idea to besmirch the BBC also, it seems to be counterproductive. Like Yashovardhan Azad said, in the big picture, the documentary is not going to make much difference to the BJP, and this survey is not going to make too much difference to the BBC. But look at what the global headlines are going to be. That India has taken action against the BBC 28 days after the documentary. Does this country still have freedom of press? What was the point of this?
Well, I do not understand freedom of press issue because I have been on TV channels for the last 9 or 10 years. I have seen same people abusing, criticizing Modi ji and the government for years together. None of that has been respected. No channel has gone down. Mirror now, as far as I remember, has always been anti-establishment. It has been running fine. So this continuous hammering of democracy in danger, I do not understand. Secondly, when I talked about Maharashtra government's action against a TV channel, Mr. Sanjay Jha dodged the question. I raised it only because we talk of freedom of index. You are showing me this press freedom of index is a joke. When Islamic country channels like those from Qatar are higher in freedom of expression as compared to India, you see that it is a joke. So we cannot pick up these kind of things which talk, which are totally biased, made out of some small organization who have no skin in the game. So you can have Pakistan happiness index higher than India. You can have Qatar having higher freedom of expression in the world. So there is something very funny about these indexes. So don't go for that.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, the index. Okay, 1 minute. Response to the index and response to the Maharashtra government.
What people are saying, I don't think these people mean anything because globally India has been abused for so many years. So every action it takes, even CA was criticized. That had nothing to do with Indian Muslims. Whatever actions have been taken by Modi, even COVID, if you remember, despite the best possible recovery, best possible recovery.
So basically you're saying we don't care. We don't care. Let the headlines come that, BBC has been targeted. We don't care. Okay.
I don't care.
So,
I don't care, yes.
You don't care. Okay. Sanjay Jha, he's saying this press freedom index is a joke. Your response to that?
Yeah, Tamanna, before I respond to that, I need to tell Mr. Azad I respectfully disagree with him when he says that the BBC documentary will have no impact on Mr. Modi's reputation or the BJP's, supposed character. I don't think so. I think I've seen the documentary, Tamanna, and I can tell you it's got damning stuff. And I understand why the BJP doesn't want the world in India to see it. Anyway, we'll discuss that some other time. As far as the indexes are concerned, this is the typical authoritarian predisposition. You just kill the messenger. The index is a bluff. BBC is liars. The truth is on the press freedom index, which, by the way, all countries seem to agree, excepting the BJP-led government here, puts India at 150 as one of its lowest ever, just ahead of Russia, ahead of Putin's Russia at 155 and China at 172. It's an embarrassment. And, let's not pretend here. I think it's about time we accepted the reality of what we are living under. This is a totalitarian system. People are scared.
We are living in a totalitarian system, says Sanjay Jha. Yashovardhan Azad wants to respond. 1 minute. I'll come to you, Charu Pragya. Karuna Gopal, I know it's been a while, but let me just get Yashovardhan Azad to respond. Yes.
The most important thing here to note is whether one likes Mr. Modi or not, whether one likes BJP or not, the issue is, in this country, I consider Supreme Court as the last court of justice. And if the Supreme Court has exonerated somebody, I am nobody to question it. And I am nobody to come up with some other facts and sensational things. Those are different things. So what I'm trying to tell Jhaji is that let this be not a debate over Mr. Modi. Let this be a debate over that Supreme Court has put or finally put a closure on this particular issue.
Okay. Let me go to the BJP spokesperson and get her point of view. Karuna Gopal, thank you for your patience. And I'm going to give you last word on this debate and ask you whether this is not just a coincidence. And if it was truly not an attack on the BBC, then why would your party colleagues today say that the BBC is a brushed corporation? There's clearly anger at the documentary.
So, Tamanna, BBC has always been a part amidst huge controversies, and you must be knowing its entire trail. Just to give one example, if Sanjay Jha was so vociferous about my government, raiding or trying to take action, haven't you seen what the UK government has done to BBC? There was a broadcast ban for almost 5 to 6 years during Margaret Thatcher's time because BBC actually called her a fascist. And obviously there was a ban. And these things are
that's sounding like freedom of press to me. If you can call the head of your country a fascist and still live to see the day, that's sounding like freedom of press, Karuna Gopal.
It was banned. It was banned for many years. It was banned, and see, let's understand that every country has had something to say against BBC. It was banned in many places. There have been the staffing rights have been questioned. Their funding channels have been questioned. So
the question is that can governments and heads of states, should they have such thin skins? If you are in power because the people are voting for you and you believe you're doing a good job, should what one organization says and what they put out matter so much that there is retaliation? That's really the question we should be asking. I'll have to wrap it up here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us. When we